The glass slipped from my daughter-in-law's hand, the instant she crumpled to the ground. Her mother, Helen, was on my kitchen floor, shaking violently, foam bubbling at her lips. And all I could think was, that wasn't meant for her. If you're here watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Before we rewind this disaster, let me make something perfectly clear. I've walked this planet for 70 years, and I didn't make it through a cutthroat business world by being a fool. When someone tries to poison you at your own retirement party, you tend to notice, especially when that person's been eyeing your fortune, like a stray cat sizing up a fish dinner. Just a couple of hours before, my kitchen had been glowing with laughter and celebration. I'd sold my firm, the one I built from the ground up, after my husband's death 15 years ago, for $23 million. My son, Michael, had pushed for this party. "Mom, you've earned a night to celebrate," he said. Those honest brown eyes of his pleading, "Let Jessica take care of the details. You just enjoy yourself." That should have been my first warning. Jessica, the woman who once complained about stacking plates, was suddenly the perfect hostess. Flowers, candles, crystal, the whole picture-perfect show. And I'll admit, it was stunning. 30 guests, business friends, neighbors, family, even a private bartender. "Only the best for you, Sarah," she'd purred, gripping my arm with those polished nails. That probably cost more than most people's rent. I was chatting with an old colleague when I noticed her by the drink table, Jessica glancing around nervously, pulling a tiny vial from her purse. My stomach froze. She tipped the contents into a single flute. The one with the small nick on the rim? My glass. Now, a lesser woman might have screamed, but I've learned, sometimes you trap a snake by letting it think you're easy prey. So I smiled, nodded, and watched her walk toward me, holding the poisoned drink. "Sarah, you must be tired," she said sweetly. "Have a sip. You deserve it." I took the glass, smiled, and waited. About 10 minutes later, when Jessica got busy flashing her new tennis bracelet to the neighbors, I quietly made my move. While she laughed and waved her wrist under the lights, I switched my glass with her mother's. Helen stood nearby, sweet scatterbrained Helen, looking lost without a drink in her hand. She picked up the glass I'd placed next to her purse, without a second thought. Within minutes, she was smiling at me, commenting on how unique the champagne tasted, asking if I'd ordered it from somewhere fancy. 5 minutes after that, she hit the floor. Jessica's scream cut through the chatter like a siren. "Call 911, she shouted, kneeling beside her mother, her voice shaking in perfect imitation of panic. Almost convincing. Almost. The trouble with pretending to be horrified is that real fear and fake fear look nothing alike. To someone who knows the difference, what happened? Michael burst through the crowd, his face pale, his eyes darting between us. He glanced at Jessica. Just a flicker, but I caught it. Too fast for most to notice. Too telling for me to miss. "I don't know," Jessica sobbed, grabbing my arm. She just collapsed. 1 second she was fine. Helen was still breathing, barely. The paramedics arrived fast, lifting her onto a stretcher, voices calm but urgent. I stood there watching Michael. 32 years of being his mother had made me fluent in his expressions. Right now, he looked like a man, watching his plan fall apart in real time. "Which hospital?" I asked one of the EM. "St. Mary's," he replied. "Are you family?" "Close enough," I said, glancing at Jessica, who was too busy hyperventilating to argue. "I'll follow in my car." "Mom, you don't have to," Michael cut in quickly. "We'll handle it. You stay here, clean up." How considerate. Wouldn't want me poking around, seeing where their perfect scheme went wrong. "Nonsense," I said crisply. "Helen's practically family." I grabbed my purse and keys before either could protest. At the hospital, I kept close enough to hear the doctors. Acute poisoning, they said. Cause unknown. One mentioned plant alkaloids. A clue sharp enough to tell me whoever planned this knew what they were doing. Jessica paced the waiting room, her heels ticking against the linoleum like a clock, each step louder than the last. Michael sat stiffly, his phone buzzing nonstop. He barely looked at it. This is just awful, Jessica murmured again and again. Poor Mom. How could this happen? I touched her arm gently. These things are strange, I said softly. The doctors will sort it out. Then, almost idly, I added, it's fortunate she didn't drink much of that champagne. Just a few sips, wasn't it? Jessica froze mid-step. Champagne, she repeated, her voice a little too tight. You think that's what caused it? Oh, I doubt it, I said lightly, waving a hand. Just an old woman's imagination. But her face had drained of color, and her fingers trembled as she lifted her coffee. Michael was watching us both, eyes sharp, unreadable. 3 hours later, the doctor returned. Helen was stable, he said. She'd live. And that was when Jessica finally stopped pretending to breathe. The tests didn't show much, the doctor explained. But whatever she consumed is passing through her system now. Can we see her? Jessica asked quickly. Family only, he replied. She's sedated. Best to come back tomorrow. As we walked out of the hospital, Michael followed me to the car. Mom, maybe you should stay with us tonight, he said. After everything that happened, I'd feel better if you weren't alone. How thoughtful. Especially coming from someone who might have just tried to kill me. Helen's little incident had clearly rattled them, and they were probably wondering if I'd figured out what really happened. The answer was yes, but they didn't need to know that. Not yet. That's sweet of you, dear, I said gently, but I'll be fine. I've got that new security system, remember? I kissed his cheek, got into my car, and watched in the rearview mirror as he and Jessica had a tense, whispered conversation in the parking lot. Back home, I opened a fresh bottle of champagne, a safe one this time, and poured myself a glass. Then I sat in my study, ready to figure out exactly what my darling family had planned, and how I was going to respond. I spent the night doing what 45 years in business had trained me for: research. Not the digital kind, the kind done with memory, suspicion, and a clear head. Helen's poisoning hadn't been random. Someone had wanted me dead. At my own celebration, probably hoping to make it look like a sudden heart attack. At 70, that would have been believable. A successful woman finally succumbing to stress. No one would have questioned it. But why? That was the $23 million question. At dawn, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Everything I knew about Michael and Jessica's finances. It wasn't encouraging. Michael's architecture firm was barely afloat, and Jessica's jewelry shop bled money faster than it made it. They lived far beyond their means. A mansion they couldn't afford, luxury cars still on payments, and a spending habit that rivaled politicians. Over the last 5 years, I'd given them nearly $200,000. Gifts, I'd called them. Investments in their happiness. But maybe they'd seen it differently. As early installments on an inheritance, they were tired of waiting for. At 7:30, the phone rang. Sarah, Jessica's voice trembled through the line. I couldn't sleep all night. I keep thinking about you. What if something in the food or champagne was bad? You're feeling okay, aren't you? How considerate of her. Checking if her poison had found its real target. Not at all. Dear, I feel perfectly fine, I said, my tone calm. Have you heard anything new about Helen? Jessica exhaled, her voice steady but too polished. The doctors think she'll be able to come home today. Probably just ate something that didn't agree with her before the party. You know how she is with her medications. She must have taken something on an empty stomach. I bit back a smile. Helen Peterson might have been scatterbrained about a lot of things, but her pills weren't one of them. She organized them like a general preparing for battle, labeled containers, color-coded lids, smartphone reminders. That's a relief, I replied warmly. I was worried it might have been something from the party. That would have been dreadful. Oh, no, Jessica cut in quickly. Definitely not. The doctors were clear, it wasn't food poisoning. Just one of those random things. How eager she was to close that topic. Almost as if she didn't want anyone. Testing the champagne still. Sitting in my kitchen. After hanging up, I walked to the counter. There it was, the same opened bottle Jessica had used the night before. Still 3/4 full, looking innocent under the morning light. I traced a finger over the glass, wondering what a lab would find inside. Not that I needed proof, I already knew what I'd seen. But evidence might come in handy later. At 9 sharp, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on my porch, holding a pink pastry box from my favorite bakery. "Thought you might want breakfast," he said, kissing my cheek. "You probably didn't eat much yesterday." I stepped aside and let him in. He moved around the kitchen like he still lived there. Opening cupboards without asking, reaching for the sugar, setting out plates. The familiarity was disarming. For a fleeting moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who used to hand me dandelions and tape his artwork to the refrigerator. When had that child grown into a man capable of standing by, while his wife tried to poison his own mother? "How are you holding up, Mom?" he asked, settling into a chair. "Oh, you know me," I said lightly. "Takes more than a little excitement to shake these old bones." He smiled, but his eyes didn't match. "That's what I was afraid of," he murmured. "Afraid of what, exactly?" I wondered. He picked at a Danish, then continued. "Jessica and I were talking about your situation." "My situation," I repeated, arching a brow. "Well, you're 70, Mom, living alone in this big house. All that money from the sale, it's a lot to manage for one person." There it was. The real reason for this breakfast visit. "I appreciate your concern, dear," I said evenly. "But I've managed just fine so far." "Have you, though?" he pressed, leaning forward. "Yesterday's incident, what if that had been you? What if no one had found you for hours?" The audacity almost made me laugh. He was using their botched murder attempt as an argument for why I shouldn't live alone. "Michael," I said, keeping my tone sweet but sharp. Helen collapsed in a crowded room with paramedics seconds away. Hardly a warning about solitary living. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well. He used to do that right before asking for something I'd say no to. "Look," he said, trying for sincerity. "Jessica and I have been researching some really nice senior communities, places with people around, activities, medical support, the works." The nursing home pitch. So soon after the poisoning, how considerate. "How thoughtful," I said, smiling faintly. "And I suppose you already have a particular place in mind." "Actually, yes." He pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward me with rehearsed enthusiasm. "It's called Sunset Manor. Only 20 minutes from us. You'd love it. There's a golf course, a spa, cultural events. It's more like a resort than a retirement home." How charming, I thought. A luxury cage for the inconvenient mother who'd stubbornly refused to die on schedule. "Not at all, sweetheart. I'm perfectly fine. Any updates on Helen?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Jessica sighed with carefully measured worry. "The doctors say she's doing better. They think she might have taken one of her pills wrong. Probably on an empty stomach. You know how she is." I almost laughed. Helen might misplace her keys, but that woman tracked her medication like an air traffic controller. She'd labeled every pill case and set alarms for each dose. "Well, that's wonderful news," I said smoothly. I was half afraid it was something from the party. "Oh, no, nothing like that," Jessica interrupted, a little too fast. They were sure it wasn't food or drink related, just one of those freak things. So eager to close the subject, almost like she didn't want anyone testing the champagne. After we hung up, I walked to the counter where that same half-empty bottle sat, quiet, harmless looking, and very likely the star witness in a murder attempt. I ran my hand along the glass. I didn't need a lab report to know the truth. Still, a little scientific proof might be handy down the line. At 9 sharp, the doorbell rang. Michael stood there, smiling too wide, a pink box of pastries in his hand from the bakery he knew I loved. "Brought breakfast," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Figured you didn't eat much yesterday." I let him in, watching as he moved through my kitchen like he still belonged there. Opening cabinets, reaching for mugs, finding the sugar without asking. And for a fleeting moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who used to bring me wildflowers and stick drawings of us holding hands. Now he stood there, calm and polished, pretending innocence while standing in the aftermath of his own betrayal. "How are you holding up, Mom?" he asked, taking a seat across from me. "Oh, you know me," I said lightly. "Takes more than a little drama to shake these old bones." He smiled, but the warmth never reached his eyes. "That's what worries me." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. He picked at a pastry, trying to sound casual. "Jess and I were talking about your situation." "My situation? Well, you're 70 now, living alone in this big house, and with the money from the sale. It's a lot to handle." There it was, the next phase of their plan. "I appreciate the concern, dear," I said sweetly, "but I've been managing just fine." He leaned closer, his voice soft but insistent. "Ah," turning their failed attempt into a safety lecture. "Clever." "Michael," I said evenly. "Helen fainted at a party surrounded by 30 people and paramedics. That's hardly a warning about solitude." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. A move I recognized from every time he wanted something expensive. "Mom, listen," he said carefully. "Jessica found this place. It's called Sunset Manor. It's beautiful. They've got golf, a spa, even art programs. More like a resort than a retirement home. It's close to us, so we could visit all the time." I smiled slowly. How thoughtful of them. Planning such a comfortable little cage. For the mother who'd inconveniently refused to die. The photos on my screen showed smiling seniors playing bridge, doing water aerobics, laughing like life had become one long commercial for contentment. Everyone looked calm. Probably helped that most of them were heavily medicated. Michael's voice broke through my thoughts. "There's usually a waiting list," he said carefully. "But if someone pays up front, they move faster. The entrance fee's $400,000, it covers everything. Lifetime housing, meals, medical care. $400,000. That would drain a nice piece of my liquid savings. And once I was tucked away in that pastel retirement resort, who'd control what was left of my $22 million? Who'd decide what pills I took, what bills I paid, who signed my name?" "It sounds lovely," I said, smiling faintly. "But I'm happy here. This house still feels like your father." "Mom," Michael said softly, "Dad's been gone 15 years. Don't you think it's time for a new chapter?" The concern in his tone almost moved me. If I hadn't seen what I saw at the party, I might have believed it. A devoted son, just worried about his aging mother. Instead, I heard calculation disguised as care. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "It's a big decision." He looked relieved. "Of course. Maybe we could visit next week, just to look around." "Maybe." I stood and began clearing dishes. "I should call Helen today, make sure she's better." He hesitated. "Actually, Jessica said visitors might overwhelm her. Doctor's orders rest, and no excitement for a few days." How convenient. Keep me from the one person who might remember the champagne. When he left, I sat in my study, surrounded by silence and strategy. They'd waited until after I sold the company. Smart move. If I'd died 6 months ago, The $23 million would have passed to Michael cleanly. Now, with the sale complete, the money was accessibly and taxable. If they could make me seem confused or unstable, they could seize control legally. The phone rang. David Hartwell, my attorney and oldest confidant. "Sarah, good to hear your voice," he said. "How was the big celebration?" "Let's just say it was memorable," I replied. "I need to see you. Soon." He heard something in my tone. "Is everything okay?" I looked out at the rose garden my husband had planted 20 years ago. The blooms were thriving without him, without help. "I'm not sure," I said, "but I think I'm about to find out." David's office hadn't changed. Dark wood, heavy books, the faint scent of polished leather and power. He'd guided me through every major decision since my husband died. If anyone could help now, it was him. After his assistant brought coffee and closed the door, he said, "Tell me everything." So I did: Helen's collapse, Michael's breakfast visit, the champagne. When I finished, David leaned back, pen tapping his lip. "You're certain about what you saw?" "As certain as the sunrise." "The problem," he said, "is proving intent. Jessica could claim she added something harmless, flavoring, even a prank. Without testing that champagne, we can't prove anything." "Then test it," I said. He nodded. "If we find poison, it confirms a crime, but not necessarily who it targeted. She could claim it was meant for her mother, not you." I hadn't thought of that. Even proof wouldn't guarantee justice. David continued, "And if they fail to kill you, they might try something else: legal control. A competency challenge. On what basis? Age, living alone, stress after retirement. If they can show signs of confusion or poor judgment, they can petition for guardianship. Once they control you, they control your estate." I felt a slow chill move through me. The nursing home suddenly made perfect sense. Get me isolated, medicated, documented as declining. What do I do? David pulled out a folder thick with forms. "First, we document your mental clarity. I'll arrange a full cognitive evaluation by a specialist official record. Dated, witnessed." "Good," I said. "Next, we secure your estate. New trusts, medical directives, automatic audits on your accounts. If anyone tries to move money or claim authority, alarms go off instantly." I smiled. If they want a game, they'll have to play by my rules. We spent 2 hours constructing my defense, tightening legal knots around every cent I owned. When we finished, he closed the folder. "One more thing," he said. "If they've tried once, they'll try again. This time, they'll be careful. You need protection, real protection." "Meaning?" "Security cameras, motion sensors, a panic system. I'll recommend a company that handles high-profile clients." That was one way to say it. Apparently, I'd become valuable enough to kill. Driving home, I caught myself scanning the rearview mirror for the same car twice. Paranoia maybe, but my husband always said, "You're not paranoid if they're really after you." The phone rang just as I pulled into the garage. "Jessica?" Her voice was syrup sweet. "Sarah, just wanted to let you know Mom's home. She's feeling much better, though she doesn't remember much about last night. Doctor says that's normal." How convenient. Selective amnesia wrapped in medical approval. "I'm so glad she's all right," I said. "I'll visit tomorrow." "Oh, she's really not up for visitors," Jessica said quickly. "Maybe in a few days. I'll let you know." "Of course, dear. Tell her I'm thinking of her." After hanging up, I sat in my car, staring at the house my husband and I had bought 30 years ago. We'd built everything here. Our business, our family, our dreams. Now it felt like a fortress under siege. But I'd learned long ago, sometimes the best defense is a sharp offense. The security team arrived early the next morning. 3 men in plain uniforms, efficient and silent. By evening, my home was wired tighter than a museum. Cameras, sensors, a panic button system that would summon police in under 3 minutes. When the neighbors asked, I said it was about package theft. They nodded, sympathetic. No one questioned a widow wanting peace of mind. By afternoon, my fortress was complete. But the real safety came later, an envelope from David. Hand-delivered and heavy with finality. Inside, my new will, my revised trusts, my medical directives. Signed, sealed, and notarized. If Michael and Jessica wanted my fortune, they'd have to wait for it. And they'd get far less than they imagined. Michael's share, once the whole estate, was now a modest trust, $50,000 a year, no more. A lifetime reminder that greed always costs more than it earns. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to fund their current lifestyle. The rest of my estate would go to cancer research. And the charities eyed quietly. Supported for years. As for Jessica, she got nothing. Not a cent. I'd tolerated her for Michael's sake. But attempted murder was where I drew the line. I was rereading the documents one last time when the doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I saw Michael and Jessica on the porch, grim, tense. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said when I opened the door. "Of course, dear. Come in." They sat in the living room. Jessica perched on the edge of the sofa, ready to bolt. Michael's eyes swept the room, pausing on the new security camera in the corner. "New camera?" he asked. "Package theft," I said smoothly. "You can't be too careful these days." Jessica cleared her throat. "Sarah, we've been thinking about what happened with Mom's accident. We feel terrible about having the party here. If something we brought caused her to get sick." She dabbed delicately at her eyes. It was a convincing performance, rehearsed, but convincing. "I'm sure it wasn't anything you brought, dear," I said. "But what if it was?" Michael leaned forward, all earnest concern. "What if something was wrong with the champagne? Or the food? Mom, I'd never forgive myself if we accidentally put you in danger." There it was, the setup. "The point is," Jessica said, "we think it might be better if we took care of you for a while. Just until we're sure you're safe." "Took care of me how?" "Well," Michael said, "you could stay with us. Temporarily, until we figure out what happened." I let the silence stretch. Michael looked genuinely worried. The kind of worry that hides behind self. Jessica looked like a woman one bill away from foreclosure. "That's very thoughtful," I said at last. "But I'm perfectly safe here." "Are you, though?" Jessica's voice sharpened. "You're 70, living alone. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" The same line Michael had used yesterday. They were reading from the same script. "What if you have a fall?" Michael added. "Or a heart attack. Anything could happen." "At my age," I said lightly, "anything could happen." Which is why I spent the day updating my will. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Your will," Jessica said carefully. "Oh yes. It's amazing how a brush with mortality makes you think about these things. My old will was so outdated." Michael's face drained of color. "What kind of updates?" I smiled the same smile I'd used when he was 8 and caught lying about breaking my favorite vase. "Oh, just a few adjustments to reflect my current priorities. You know how these things go." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. I could almost hear their thoughts, calculating, scrambling. "Well," Jessica said finally, voice tight, "I'm sure whatever you decided was for the best." "I think so too, dear." They left soon after, promising to check in again. I watched from the monitor as they sat in the car for 10 minutes, arguing. Jessica gestured furiously, phone in hand. Michael tried to stop her. She shoved him away. When they finally drove off, I poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I'd start phase 2 of my plan. But tonight, I allowed myself something rare, peace. There's a particular satisfaction in watching your enemies realize they've underestimated you. The game had just begun, and I'd been playing it far longer than they had. The next morning, an unexpected visitor arrived. Helen Peterson stood on my doorstep, pale, shaken, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Sarah," she said, voice trembling, I need to talk to you. It's about the other night. I stepped aside. Come in, Helen, let's have some tea. As I poured, I studied her face, searching for any lingering sign of the poison that had started all of this. Jessica told me I had a reaction to medication, she said, easing into my armchair. But Sarah, I don't take any medication, just vitamins. Haven't for years. Interesting, I said evenly. What do you remember about the party? Almost everything, until I felt dizzy. The champagne tasted odd, bitter, metallic. And I saw Jessica by the drinks table earlier, doing something with a small bottle. My pulse quickened. What kind of bottle? An eyedropper bottle, like the kind people use for essential oils. Her fingers trembled around her teacup. Sarah, I think my daughter tried to poison you. Why would you say that? Helen gave a bitter laugh. Because she's been talking about your money for months. How unfair it is that you have so much while they struggle. How much easier life would be if something happened to you. Pieces began fitting together. Has she said anything specific? I asked. Last month, she asked if you'd updated your will. She seemed very concerned about Michael's inheritance. Helen's eyes met mine. Sarah, I think they've been planning this. I hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. Helen, I saw Jessica put something in my champagne. I switched our glasses on purpose. The color drained from her face. She tried to kill you, and I almost died instead. Yes. We sat in silence, both understanding the gravity of it. What will you do now? She whispered. I'll give them exactly what they want, I said. Just not how they expect. Her brow furrowed. Meaning your daughter and my son are about to learn that some games have higher stakes than they realize. After she left, I called Patricia Williams, an old business ally turned private investigator. Sarah Wilson, Patricia greeted warmly. I heard about your company sale. Congratulations. Thank you, Patricia. I need a favor. Personal? What kind? I want everything on my son's finances, bank accounts, loans, investments, credit cards, all of it. A pause. Sarah, are you sure? Family details can be uncomfortable. I'm sure. Give me 48 hours. While she worked, I called Michael. We met for lunch at the restaurant, where we'd celebrated his graduation and wedding. He arrived nervous, glancing at his phone. You sounded upset. Everything okay, Mom? I've been thinking about what you and Jessica said about my safety and the future, I said calmly. His face brightened, and I think you're right. It's time to make some changes. He leaned in eagerly. What kind? I looked into Sunset Manor. Called them this morning. That's great. You'll love it there. They have one suite open, but I'd need to pay by Friday. That's no problem, he said quickly. I'd like you and Jessica to help with the paperwork. Of course. There's one more thing. The facility requires a power of attorney. I was hoping you'd take that role. Anything you need, Mom. Perfect. He thought he'd won. 2 days later, Patricia called back. Sarah, she said, you'd better sit down. And as she described Michael and Jessica's financial chaos, I smiled. They were already drowning. All I had to do now was hand them the rope. It was worse than I feared. Patricia's report read like a ledger of desperation. They'd refinanced the house 3 times. 2 mortgages and a home equity line completely maxed out. Credit cards. Over $80,000 of revolving debt. How have they been making payments? I asked. Barely, Patricia said. Michael's firm has had losses for 2 years. They're juggling cards to pay other cards. Classic signs of being underwater. Anything else? Her voice dropped. Jessica took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago, $500,000. She's the beneficiary. Ice crept under my skin. How is that legal? She cited insurable interest as a daughter-in-law and caregiver. The insurer probably assumed Michael would ultimately benefit and accepted the application. A policy they had been planning for my death for months, not merely a moment of madness. There was more. Michael's been sending regular payments to a Dr. Richard Steinberg, a geriatric psychiatrist, Patricia added, small amounts, dated 3 months ago. Why? I asked. Unclear. Consultation fees, on the surface. But I'll dig deeper. Dr. Steinberg. I made a mental note to ask David about him. That afternoon, Michael and Jessica arrived, bearing a briefcase and a stack of forms for Sunset Manor. They spread the papers across my dining table like officers drawing up a campaign. This is the admission contract, Jessica said, tapping a thick packet. And this is the financial disclosure. It lists assets to calculate monthly fees. It's thorough, I observed. They wanted access to my accounts, every investment, every account. Michael nudged another sheet toward me. Power of attorney paperwork, he said. Standard. Gives me authority to manage your finances if you can't. I read it carefully. The document was far broader than his casual description. With my signature, he'd gain immediate control over bank accounts, investment portfolios, and the power to transfer funds or sell assets. This seems extensive, I said. Do I need to grant that much authority? It's a precaution, Michael said. The facility requires it, and at your age, someone younger should handle the complicated stuff. At my age, I repeated, tasting the condescension. What if I change my mind after moving? Can this be revoked? Jessica exchanged a glance with Michael. Technically, yes, she said. But the facility has medical evaluations and waiting periods. It's complicated. Of course it was. Once I signed and moved, they'd have the paperwork and the practical leverage to make it extremely difficult for me to leave, especially if Dr. Steinberg were prepared to testify to my supposed decline. I need to think overnight, I said, gathering the papers. It's a big decision. Michael's excitement curdled into impatience. We need to submit by tomorrow to hold the unit. I understand, I said. You'll have my answer in the morning. After they left, I called David Hartwell. David, what do you know about Richard Steinberg? Steinberg's a geriatric psychiatrist, he replied. Specializes in competency evaluations. Is he reliable? I asked. David hesitated. He's known to produce opinions favorable to families seeking guardianship. I've seen his reports used in several cases. The outline of their plan sharpened. Get me into Sunset Manor under the banner of safety and care. Obtain power of attorney to access my funds. If I resisted, have Steinberg declare me incompetent. It was surgical. It was legal. It would be devastating. Prepare something for me. I told David. We need paperwork ready by tomorrow. What kind of paperwork? He asked. The kind that teaches them a lesson. That evening, I reviewed every detail. Patricia's findings, the insurance policy, Dr. Steinberg's name, the power of attorney form. Everything had to be flawless. Friday dawned gray and cool, a weather that seemed made for deliberate acts. Michael and Jessica arrived at 9, dressed as if for a business meeting. Their smiles were brittle with eagerness. Have you decided, Mom? Michael asked as he took the living room chair like a man defending a prize. I have, I said, and placed the notarized Sunset Manor contract on the table. I think it's time. Relief flooded Jessica's face. Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful. You'll love it there. And Michael, I added, I've signed the power of attorney as well. His hands trembled as he took the papers. He was visibly stunned, a boy who'd had his wish granted too easily. This is the right decision, he said, voice too bright. You won't regret it. We spent the next hour inputting account numbers, access codes, and sign-in details with Jessica's laptop open and her fingers moving like a clerk at a bank as I dictated. They traded looks of disbelief and triumph, as if the world had handed them an early inheritance. There's one more form, I said finally. My attorney will need to sign something before transfers go through. It's about tax implications. Do you want us to drive you to his office? Michael asked. Actually, I said, he's coming here. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. I rose and walked to the entryway, smiling a private smile. The visitor on the porch was not David. Instead, I watched through the security feed as a delivery van idled one. I recognized from Patricia's background checks. It was the beginning of the payoff. The trap closing with legal forms and cameras, and I felt the steady thrill of being 2 moves ahead at last. Ready, patient, and relentless. It wasn't David at the door. It was Detective Lisa Morrison from the local police department. Flanked by another officer I didn't recognize. Mrs. Wilson, she said evenly. We need a few minutes of your time. It concerns an incident that took place here earlier this week. Michael shot to his feet. What incident? Suspected poisoning, Morrison replied, her gaze shifting sharply between Michael and Jessica. We've received reports about a medical emergency at your home during a party. Jessica's complexion drained. That was my mother, she stammered. She reacted badly to her medication. The doctor said it was nothing serious. The detective's tone didn't waver. That's not what the toxicology report shows. Your mother's blood contained high levels of oleander extract. It's not medicine, it's poison. The air in the room thickened. I could hear my heartbeat. Detective Morrison continued. The remaining champagne from that night was analyzed. The bottle opened during the party tested positive for the same toxin. Someone deliberately contaminated it. Michael turned toward Jessica, horror spreading across his face. Jess, what did you do? I didn't do anything, she cried, panic creeping into her voice. This is insane. Why would I poison my own mother? That's what we're trying to understand, Morrison said. Particularly since the glass containing the highest concentration of poison was meant for Mrs. Wilson. Jessica's knees looked ready to give way. Michael slumped into his chair, pale and speechless. There's something else, I said quietly. Detective, show them the document. Morrison opened a folder and produced a sheet of paper. 6 months ago, Mrs. Hartwell, you took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Wilson with yourself as beneficiary. That creates a clear financial motive. Jessica's voice broke. Sarah, please tell them this isn't true. I looked her in the eye. I saw you, Jessica. You poured the champagne, switched the glasses. I switched them back. Michael's head snapped toward me. You knew? You knew she was trying to poison you. I've known for days, I said calmly. I know about the debt, the insurance, the payments to Dr. Steinberg, and your plan to declare me incompetent. I know everything. The paper slid from Michael's shaking hands. Mom, I didn't know about the poison, he whispered. I swear. I didn't. I thought Jessica just wanted to help get you somewhere safe. She said you were slipping, that you needed care. She convinced me this was for your own good. But you knew about the power of attorney, I said coldly. And about moving me into that facility? His silence was enough of an answer. Detective Morrison stepped forward. Jessica Hartwell, you're under arrest for attempted murder. As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Jessica turned on me, her eyes blazing. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. I met her glare. Actually, I know exactly what I've done. After the officers led her away, the house fell silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Michael remained on the couch, staring at the scattered papers as though they were ashes of his own making. She told me it was just about protecting you, he murmured, that you were forgetting things, making reckless choices. She said we needed control of your finances to keep you safe. The debt, she said it would all be fine once things settled. I never imagined she'd speed up my death, I asked. He swallowed hard. We're drowning, Mom. The business is collapsing. The bills, everything. Jessica said if something happened to you naturally, we'd inherit enough to rebuild. I thought we were just preparing for the inevitable. How thoughtful, I said dryly. You only planned for my death, just not the method. Tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant for any of this. I didn't want to hurt you. I studied him, searching for honesty buried beneath guilt. Part of me longed to believe he'd simply been manipulated. But deep down, I knew better. Show me your phone, I said. He blinked. What? Your messages with Jessica. Let me see them. After a long pause, he handed it over. I scrolled through the recent texts, each line confirming what I already suspected. Jessica, did you talk to her about Sunset Manor? Michael, yes, she's thinking about it. Jessica, good. The sooner she moves, the better. She's asking too many questions. Michael, what if she changes her mind? Jessica, she won't. Not after tomorrow night. I stopped reading. The evidence was clear. I handed the phone back to him, my expression steady. You knew, Michael, I said softly. You may not have poured the poison, but you were part of the plan. He said nothing. The truth hung heavy in the silence, undeniable and final. Michael's eyes were hollow. I thought Jessica just wanted to scare you, he said. Maybe stage a break-in. Something to make you move. I stared at him, cold. You were fine with that? Letting her terrorize me. He shook his head weakly. Not hurt you, just convince you it wasn't safe living alone. My stomach turned. Even now, he didn't hear how twisted that sounded. Michael, I said quietly, I had someone look into your finances. His face went white. You what? I know about the debt. The mortgages, the credit cards, the business losses. I set Patricia's report on the table. But what really caught my attention, I said, were your payments to Dr. Steinberg. He rubbed his face. I can explain. Please do. Because you paid him months before you ever mentioned my mental health. Michael's voice cracked. Jessica said we needed a backup plan. Steinberg agreed to find signs of dementia if we asked, you mean declare me incompetent? He whispered, only if you refused to cooperate. I looked at him for a long moment. You were ready to erase me, Michael, all for money. He couldn't meet my eyes. I leaned back. One more thing. The papers you signed today, the power of attorney, they're fake. He blinked. What? They give you control of one account. It has exactly $1 in it. My real assets are locked in trusts you'll never touch. If you're convicted of fraud or conspiracy, you get nothing. Not even that. Michael's voice broke. You've destroyed my life. No, I said. You destroyed it yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy mine too. 3 months later, the roses were blooming again. Jessica was serving 15 years for attempted murder. Michael Guthrie for conspiracy. The night before, Emma called. Grandma, I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't know what they were doing. I know, sweetheart, I told her. It's not your fault. Come visit this summer. Her small voice brightened. I'd love that. Helen Peterson had become my friend. 2 women tied together by betrayal. We met twice a week for coffee. You know, Helen said, they almost got away with it. I smiled faintly. Not really. People have been after my money for decades. This time, they just shared my last name. She laughed softly. Do you ever regret it? I paused. I regret that it had to happen, I said, but not that I protected myself. Doorbell rings. Through the monitor, I saw David Hartwell, smiling. I have good news, he said. The insurance company voided Jessica's policy. They're refunding everything she paid. I nodded. Justice, in its own way. There's more, he added. Michael's creditors are taking the house. Do you want to buy it back? I thought about that marble palace. No, let someone honest have it. David smiled and handed me one last folder. Your trust is finalized. No one can touch a cent without your written consent. I signed, then looked out at the sunlight over the roses. For the first time in months, I felt truly safe. The trust was airtight. If anyone tried to have me declared incompetent, everything would go straight to charity. "Thank you, David," I said as he left. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and watched the sunset turn the sky gold and rose. At 70, I finally understood. Money reveals who people truly are. Sadly, my own family had shown me their worst. But I'd learned something too. I was stronger than they thought. Smart enough to see their plan, tough enough to stop it, and brave enough to start over. My phone buzzed a text from Emma. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern Pre-Law just like you said." I smiled, typing back, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." That, I realized, was the real victory. Not defeating Michael and Jessica, but helping the next generation choose better. Emma would grow up knowing that money is a tool, not the goal. That family means love and loyalty, not control and greed. The roses in my garden were in full bloom again, tended by someone I trusted. My home was peaceful now, safe, secure, and entirely mine. This story began with a failed poisoning at my own party, but it was never just about survival. It was about the difference between growing old and giving up your power. I may be sick, but I am far from powerless. Anyone who forgets that will learn what my family did. Underestimating a sharp old woman can be a very expensive mistake. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And as I watched the sunset fade, I realized I'd managed both, and I'd sleep just fine knowing it.